Hello, welcome to SUNY ESF and Gateway Center. We're excited to have you all here today, and I am excited for this evening's conversation about the new agricultural movement and also to introduce the Kimballs. Before we get started, I want to welcome everyone to come up to the front of the room and to highlight that we are going to be also carrying this portion, our presentation this evening, as well as the panel that will be following live on ESF TV, which you can find at youtube.com/ESFTV. There's a number of individuals that are responsible for making tonight possible, and I want to make sure that we recognize all of those that have helped this happen. So it starts out actually with a conversation in a farm field in which we were asked by Mark, if you're the College of Environmental Science and Forestry, you're not getting it right. You're not doing your job. And that really prompted me. It was kind of a fun challenge because I realized that all of us at ESF think we are working very hard to try and get it right. And what I realized was that he was asking us to stand and deliver. And we, as individuals at SUNY ESF in our communities, we believe that we're coming here to be prepared so that we can go out into the world and ask the world to stand and deliver. And we really need to recognize that we can have the best science and we can understand systems, but if we don't match that and partner that with really good communication skills, that we're not going to be able to get our message out and we're not going to be able to encourage the world to make good decisions and to change. And that change starts individually, and that's part of Mark and Kristen's message, is what can we do as individuals to create change, and then how can we share the change that we're in our own lives pursuing to encourage those that are intersecting with us to change their lives as well. So that kernel of a conversation in a farm field as we were going out to change the electric fencing around some cows really is what fast-forwarded to our being together right now tonight. And I'm really excited about what's going to happen. We're going to have the presentation from the Kimballs. We're going to have a fantastic reception afterwards with farm-to-table foods. And then following that, we're going to have a panel discussion with a number of ESF alumni. And we'll be throughout this entire experience, we're going to be engaging with you to hear your questions so that we can talk about experiences, opportunities, challenges, and pathways from college to career around agriculture-related opportunities. And it should be what we're hoping is going to be pretty fun and certainly lively and energetic. And no police. I do want to recognize the people who helped make tonight happen. And there's a number of partners that we have across the college campus and also extending over to SU. And I'm just going to read these through. There's a number of particular individuals behind each of these office names, each of these departmental names. I'm not going to go through all of the individuals who helped make this happen, but I do want to let you know that this is an interdisciplinary commitment. And it starts with the Department of Environmental Studies, the Department of Landscape Architecture, Division of Environmental Science, the Division of Student Affairs, the Earth Week Committee, also the ESF Alumni Association, who in particular is making tonight's live streaming possible. We have Folk College from Syracuse University and their Food Studies program, the Friends of the Moon Library, which we are really appreciative of having made Kristen's book available to the entire campus. That was fantastic in order to engage people around reading their experiences and starting the Essex Farm. Moon Library, the Northern Forest Institute at the Newcomb campus, the Office of Communications, the Office of Experiential Learning and Outreach, the Office of Sustainability, the Onondaga County Resource Recovery Agency, the Sustainable Energy Club, and the Writing, Rhetoric, and Communications program. And I just want to conclude before introducing Mark and Kristen by introducing myself. My name is Paul Hay. I'm the Associate Director at ESF's Newcomb campus in the Adirondacks. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit us, please do. I am also a graduate of the college. I earned my master's in biology and EFB in 2000 and started working for the college shortly after that. And my career prior to my earning my master's was in hotel and restaurant management, and I've had a passion for food my entire life. And I'm really excited that I get to work at an institution that is committed to environmental issues, environmental sustainability, and that food is a common thread through all of what we do, not just what we eat in the Trailhead Cafe, not just in how we design and manage farms, manage landscape architecture, all of the different aspects that we are engaged in as a college, and each of you are pursuing in your college preparatory experience. So I appreciate you being in the room and look forward to having you join us throughout this activity and again through the reception. Come on in. Throughout this reception and into the panel afterwards. So, Mark and Kristen, thank you for being here, and I appreciate the time that you took to come and spend with us today and this evening. Thank you very much.
Not to extend the intros too much longer, but I just want to send a really heartfelt thanks to Paul I remember the day that you came to the farm, and I came out and I heard Mark saying audacious and slightly insulting things to you, and it takes a very special person to then, invite us so graciously to come speak at this institution. And I also just want to say thank you for just making it so smooth and easy, and thank you to the students. We had the opportunity to meet some of you in classes yesterday and today, and really we're just impressed by the thoughtfulness of your questions and the passion you clearly have for your engagement with the world. So thank you, everybody.
And that looks like a class. We're so excited to be here. This is a perfect vacation from being in the fields and to connect with some of the communication that I think Paul alluded to. I generally like to know what I'm in for, because as soon as we set down what we're in for, then I immediately change it up. But I thought that to tell you what we're going to do in the next hour and 20 minutes with you all, we did the hello, that part's set. We have very quiet goals that we're not going to tell you. Basically, we want all of you to become farmers. That's one of the best kept secrets in the world. It's not going to happen. 1 out of 99 of you won't end up farming, and the rest definitely won't. We want you to change the way you eat. We don't want you to eat processed food from anywhere except your own kitchen, and we want you to buy whole food. We want to change, and this is also things we want to change in ourselves. We want to change what you do. A lot of you have already figured out what direction you're going in. It's one of the most impressive things about SUNY ESF is a lot of you have a direction that you're studying for, which is really powerful. We want to shift that so that your career goes back to A. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I think most importantly of all, our last goal should be our first and foremost, and it should be repeated, sung to the heavens, walk down underneath some basement, sing it there too. It is fairly likely that although bankers always say your investment is going to increase, that our current investment in our own habitat is not leading to an improved habitat. Whether it's waters or soils or predominantly the climate itself, we have done a remarkably bad job of making our habitat better for us and for future generations. And farming is a huge part of that destruction. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we try to turn those tables around completely. So those are our quiet goals. We're not going to talk about it. What we are going to talk about it is what we do. And luckily our team, which is an amazing team, put together for you this week's offering. This is sort of the weakest time of the year for vegetables. It's most of our storage crops. We're a couple weeks colder than everybody else in the room. But we brought what 1 week's share looks like. And we're going to introduce this first, talk a little bit about the people behind the food and how our members support us. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how Kristen and I got started in farming and what we love about what we do. And there are plenty of things that are frustrating, but it's really cool that we still, after, in my case, almost 35 years, and in Kristen's case, after 15 years of farming, the best thing in the world because it's so challenging and so satisfying. Kristen has just finished, as of Monday, you can start the applause now. Her second book is in and going to copy.
Thank you.
And this will be the first keynote reading of the introductory section of that book. So we're going to do a little 6-minute teaser reel, I think they call it. I'm not sure that's exactly what you call it. But anyway, she's going to read from her book and take some questions about that and writing. We're going to go into a little more depth about the intersection of our habitat, our farm, and then what you as individuals and us as a group have to start doing. It's not an option. 1,000 species a day go extinct or something ridiculous like that. I mean, we're dealing with cataclysmic events, and we're having a pretty good time talking about them indoors. We have to go outdoors, see what we're talking about, and change it. So the last section will be, how do we take action? It is no longer a time to discuss. We know how to change what we don't like. We are not doing it. So that's really the most exciting part for me. I want to see you next week text me something new you did to change your habits, because your habits are killing our habitat. Mine too. And then the last will be a reading from Kristen's first book, a beautiful coda from the end of the book. So that is what you're in for. Sound okay?
Great. And we'll have a lot of question and answer opportunities too. We like to kind of intersperse the questions and answers so that nobody falls asleep we all keep lively, and we make sure that we respond to what you really want to talk about.
And that can start now. So if something I just said made you on fire, we all love to see fire, right? Like I was juggling fire before the cops took me out earlier. Full tackle, rubber bullets, riot gear, whatever. But I'm done with the juggling fire. We can juggle little rubber balls, but not fire. That's fine. But if you have something that you're like, I can't keep this inside, we all want to hear it. So please bring it forth. And I think with no further ado, we can introduce the share. You want to come down here and introduce it with me?
You do it. You do it.
Okay.
I'll move through this.
This is my part. Kristen's like, you want to do the share? We're going to do the share. So farming makes me cry, right? Like this is outrageous that out of 2,000 acres and 25 people and 6 draft horses and 4 tractors and a lot of history before us that cleared the land, that we were able to create in the middle of basically the lean time of year, right before stuff starts growing is actually the time when colonial settlers ran out of food. It was like the root cellar was empty, the livestock was pretty thin. This is what our weekly share looks like. And what we've designed is a share of food that we want to eat, and then we're basically selling that to members. But let's just talk through what's in this week's share. This was a random assortment ordered by one of our staff in the front of the farm. A woman named Antu put together the order. Anyone can order whatever combination and whatever quantity they want if they get a delivered share. The packaging here is for the delivered share. We also do an on-farm share that people pick up. The on-farm share, they would wrap their own meat. They would put things in their own containers instead of these bags. And this is the rundown. I mean, this is absolutely glorious. From soap, 3 kinds of potatoes, carrot juice. I used to hate carrot juice, love it now. Salt that we don't produce ourselves. Hot sauce that you're going to get to try. You're going to get to try all these things. If you're hungry for it right now, raise your hand, you can have some. Some ruby kraut, carrots, beef shanks, ground pork, lamb shoulder, pureed squash. We've done some value-added things because we know that people are having a hard time learning how to cook. So everything from tortillas, bread dough, some pureed squash. And then I think that the staff was joking with me a little bit. Not everybody orders sheep kidneys every week. But raw sheep kidney is like, oh, it's so good. I was just seeing how you guys are awake or not. I want to see what they look like. Our first greens came out of the greenhouse this Monday. We planted these a few weeks ago. Pea sprouts we're trying for the first time. Our scallions are just coming out of the field overwintered. Leeks from overwintered. Beets, onions, the parsnips we just dug this spring. And then we've done grains, vegetables. A lot of the grains we didn't grow this year. We bought them in from an organic farm nearby and an organic mill we're happy to live down the road from, including the black beans. I brought some cheese along for us to have with the kidneys. And it's still funny to me. It doesn't have to be funny to you. And then one of the highlights of the farm for me is the dairy. We milk right now 17 cows. These are the beautiful sheep kidneys in case you wanted to see what they look like. If you set them on top of the milk, it's sort of like a wine pairing, right? You put the sheep kidney on top of the yogurt and the cream, and you're all set. They're still a little frozen, so if you want.
Those are kidneys. Oh, they are kidneys. Those are kidneys.
So there are your kidneys. So of the dairy products, we're only selling milk, and then we have some homemade products here: yogurt, cheese curds, sour cream, fresh sweet cream, and probably my favorite of all, butter. If you have when we get to the section where you're going to start doing something different to change the world to make it better, I suggest going out and getting higher quality fats. That if you're going to spend $10 extra on food, find a farmer who's growing grass-fed fats in the form of butter. With that kidney flavor, it's so good. I'll drop the kidney thing eventually once you laugh really loudly, then we can go on to the next funny thing. So, any questions about the weekly share? This is, what are we at, week 17 of the year? We start our year at the calendar year, and this is some of the offerings that members had a chance to order this week. Any questions about the food itself? This is the product that those 2,000, I mean, think about it like making moonshine. You have all this big vat of alcohol and you sort of condense it. We have this giant 2,000-acre farm and it gets condensed into this nutrition we call food. This is the best thing in the world, right? Food from the ground that each has a farmer that you can put behind it and a place that it grew, and you could actually go out there and find, before it was slaughtered, where the lamb was in this lamb shoulder.
Grow and raise quantities
Great. So one of the challenges that other farmers who look at our model ask is, how do you grow the right amount for what the members are going to order? And we let members order whatever they want. And over the years, we started just growing for the two of us. We didn't even have kids at that point. Miranda and Jane are here, our 2 daughters. They've been really patient with all this, so special thanks to you both. Yeah, exactly. But getting the balance right has involved a combination of different kinds of freezers and refrigeration. We found that it was sometimes easier to do more slaughter at one time and then wrap and freeze things. And realizing that members aren't as excited about parsnips as they are about carrots, even though parsnips are an amazing sort of diverse plant in the wintertime. So we definitely are always adjusting, and the way we do those adjustments involves working with schools and food banks when we have surpluses. And if we have a shortage of something, if there was a huge run on potatoes, I will also call up organic farmers that exceed organic standards the way we try to and say, we need some potatoes, we ran out. We've never, in the 15 years we've offered the membership, there was only 1 week, that was our honeymoon, right? That we didn't offer a share. And then all the other weeks of the last 15 years, there has been food for the members. And we told the members in advance, we're going to take a 1-week honeymoon. And all we did that week was butcher and milk cows and harvest vegetables. It was so romantic.
So romantic.
Any other questions about the product, right? So we're at stage 1. This is the food.
There's the source of that kidney right there. That one.
Oh, yeah, those are the kidney producers. People wonder what kidney tastes. It's sticky, too, right? Smells like sheep urine. That's what kidneys do. It's okay. Do you want to talk about the model next?
Sure, go for it.
So any more questions about food? I think we're good. We're going to move on to this bigger model that we didn't invent in any way, but we started out with the goal of giving ourselves a homestead diet. And then we thought, wait, instead of just giving ourselves a homestead diet, I think we can offer this at scale. Let's offer more households a homestead diet. So really, that's the basis of what we do. It's the limitation and success of a lot of our products. Our citrus crop obviously isn't there because we can't grow citrus in New York. So there's lots of things we don't provide. But the idea is, oh, it worked for us. We're having a really good time. We don't get greens most of the winter. We do have some more greenhouse production now. But we have a pretty good time shredding up carrots and celery root in the winter. I wonder if we can sell this to other people. And so what we've done over the last 15 years is answered that question and said, yes, we are going to sell this to other people. And now we have approximately 85 or 90 households, maybe 330, 340 people a week, not including some of the schools, the food banks, restaurants that occasionally come by and say, hey, do you have any of this, that support the farm. And that membership, I think, was 97% of our gross last year. And in just to give you the numbers of the model, so these families either pay us all in advance, or if they can't afford to do that, they pay us weekly. And last year, they brought into our economy over $1 million, which sounds like a tremendous amount of money. And out of that money, like squeezing blood from a stone, we were hopefully able to, and we haven't finished all of our taxes, but I think we netted between $10,000 and $20,000. The rest of it went back to the team we work with every day, the investment in the machinery, some livestock, we'll buy in some breeding stock. It's incredibly expensive to farm. So that's just roughly the model is households buy a share, buy the person, and then they get all they can eat for the whole year. It's a subscription just like you'd subscribe to a magazine. Not everybody orders all the time. Some people are away. They're like, hey, give my food to somebody else. So that's the model. Any questions about the model or anything you want to add to that?
I think I would add that 2 things. That you might know this already, but our model is very unusual. When we first started farming,
We're really normal.
I didn't know quite how unusual it was because I didn't come from a farming background. I came from New York City.
And I just kept telling her, this is totally normal. Everybody does this.
And to make a farm like ours work, you have to either love or be tolerant of a certain amount of chaos.
Wait, which one is which? Are you the tolerant one or the love it?
I'm the tolerant one.
Nice. Great.
And it fits us in a strange way. And the farm works together on a more sort of theoretical level. We have this system that involves animals and this system that involves plants, and they really feed each other. And just to watch how those systems work together is a really elegant and beautiful thing. Nothing's ever wasted on our farm because there's always something that will eat it. And if there's not something that will eat it, it goes into our compost barn where it's made into fertility for the next year. So you know, if you're from a farm family or you've been around farms a lot, you might be listening to us and thinking, this sounds absolutely mad. And it is on a certain level, but it's also a really exciting farm to be a part of. I'm very lucky that I met you and ended up here.
Yeah.
I am.
That was huge. Usually, often, yeah, okay, great.
Even
You will
though
also
we never
get
got
to
a honeymoon.
You'll also see us get to have a fight during this. We try to have one time where no, you're wrong, Mark. Shh. We'll get that to later. Sweet, and it is beautiful to think that behind the model, like Kristen said, when a cow takes a dump in the wintertime, that becomes, after microbes eat that manure, the compost that we put on the field of oats. Right? So this idea of diversified farming isn't just good for us to eat, right? We started with this is the gateway to cool, farming is great, look at all this great food. Behind it, we have a team that we'll talk about next. But really exciting as a farmer is that all of your waste stream becomes your input stream for another product. And what American agriculture, paraphrasing Wendell Berry, did absolutely worst was it took a waste stream away from an input stream. In other words, we have factories that are awesome and produce meat very cheaply, and there's lots of benefits to them, but then all the manure and urine just sits in lagoons and never goes onto the ground. Then we have
Can I tell you the way Wendell Berry said it, which was really elegant?
Why don't you do that?
Okay. He said, when we separated animal agriculture from plant agriculture, we took a solution and made two problems of it.
Which is the urine and the manure got separated from the soil, right? And if you put them back, then the soil starts to build. And one of the things we'll get to a couple different ways, hopefully here, and it's what I'm most excited about, is how soil building could be a significant part of climate change. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the science behind that. Before we go too much further, the most important part about what we do, and it has taken me years to learn this, and I'm stubborn, and I'm not a very good manager, and I've learned that the hard way so many times. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Agree. But Kristen, who's a good manager, is like, Mark, you deal with the people. So I'm like, wait, am I a good manager or not? You're not willing to deal with them. I'm dealing with them poorly, which is better. Anyway, over the years, our team has grown. And right now, we have a team of English people, who are people that speak English, and a team of Amish, who are people that speak Pennsylvania Dutch. The Amish are about a third of our workforce. Again, our peak is around 30 to 35 people on summer payroll, including part-time. And that, for me, although the challenge is still, how do you work with people? How many of you have been in a relationship before? How many of you have had a relationship with no disagreements before? When you're working in the field with somebody physically, all day long, and you're not that good at what you do because we're trying to do all of this, and the list of what we have to do is, 100 times what we ever get to? It is very easy to have friction. And those of you, how many of you have worked on farms before or are farmers? I know a couple faces in here now. So some of you have been out there. But it is truly the team and our ability to connect to one another that leads to the synergy that allows this to be here to look at today, right? It is not that Kristen and I go out there all day and do all the milkings. I milk twice a week on Sunday. We have a team that helps us do the rest of it. And so the team, while it may include some members, and in fact, one of our farm managers right now was a member who moved to our town because of our farm, and then she's like, you're looking for a front-of-the-house manager, I'll take that job, and she's become one of the best managers we've ever had. But I think it's really important when you hear us speak to realize that part of what we're doing today, go back to here, is we spend a lot of time, everyone I meet, true? I'll be in a taxi, and I'll be like, hey, you a taxi driver? You want to come farm? And Kristen will be like, why are you talking to the taxi driver? I am unapologetically excited to rope you in, if not to our farm, to any farm in the world. And creating a team on the land is now something truly rare. Very few of us want to be on the land working in the sun with the weather and the animals and the plants that provide our sustenance. And as a result, we end up having, I would call, a very unbalanced habitat for all of us and a really unhealthy food stream. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. But it really is the joy of working with people and the patience that we all have to have. And I think for me as a manager, the thing that I've changed is every week I try to talk to the people that report to me and have one conversation that starts with, how are you doing and how can I help you? And although farming is really what we've been training ourselves to do, and how do you grow a potato and how do you slaughter a lamb well, the truth is, to me, the most exciting and challenging part is still eye contact. Who are we? Where are we going? Anything you want to add to team and who we are, from food to the model to the membership? You want to talk a little bit about the members?
Let me just add one little thing about the team. Last summer, we have morning meeting at 6 o'clock every morning. You have to be there on time. Mark gets very upset when people are late. So people are.
You see me happy now. I'm not happy if you're late.
And I don't usually go to morning meeting, but I was there, and I look around the table, and we've got 3 Amish people. We've got an evangelical Christian family who's there. We have an ex-Amish who converted to Messianic Judaism. We have a whole collection of atheists. We've got a lot of gender and orientation diversity around the table. And Mark looks around the table and he goes, we might be the most diverse group of white people ever assembled on the planet.
And then we hired 2 Vietnamese Americans, and we couldn't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Totally depressing to work with other people, right?
My point is that I think food and the creation of food is one of the greatest unifying forces in the world. You can take people from any point on the political spectrum, and guess what? Everybody eats. And most of us will figure out that if we are exposed to farming, we find that we have a passion for this thing that makes us human, which is creating food out of dirt and sun and sweat and water and earth. And I think that's one of the coolest things that I've learned in the last 15 years.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. So respiration is so key to what we do. Even roots of plants respire. We don't think about that because we think about them capturing sunlight. I think stand up, because I want you to get a little blood flow. Stand up once. Stretch up to the idea that there is a sun somewhere that we can't see. Bring your arms down. I'm getting you ready for the Q&A part, and I just know you're going to need a little prep. Shake it out. Your body is a miracle, and one of the best parts about farming is you feel your body in good ways and bad. You get stronger, you get hurt. It's freaking amazing. Your body is outrageous, and it should be the seed of excitement that gets us to be empowered to make change. Okay, a little shake, a little. Okay, you're getting ready to ask questions, so I'm getting you prepped. You may now sit down if you would like. So who has any questions about part 3, Essex Farm, Kristen and Mark as a business, anything you like? Anyone have questions that came up from what we just said? Please, they don't have to be well-formed questions. Someone else can help you. I saw your hand first. Go ahead. They get to work with me. We do, actually. We have a couple stitches each year. We work with a physical therapist and a couple doctors. The question was, what benefits do we provide with our farmers? This is going to get into some other fun parts of the conversation because we're still paying between minimum wage and $15 an hour as sort of our spread from beginner to manager. And we have no benefits. In fact, we actually take benefits out of their paycheck if they choose to buy a share or to use our housing. That said, what we just spoke about are the benefits we have, which is, I think, working closely together on an impossible task with a group of people is the best benefit on the planet. So while we have not achieved any parity with our membership in terms of income, I think that there's a deep satisfaction that comes for all of us. And I think we all realize that we're on the front lines of something that hasn't been done well in 10,000 years. So the answer is definitively no, there are no benefits, except the answer is definitively yes, it's one of the most incredible things ever. But in terms of setting up farming as a place where you could graduate and pay off your debt in a reasonable amount of time, really challenging.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that question?
Well, it brings up a subject that we talked about in both of the classes that we met with yesterday and today, which is triple bottom line accounting. So it's this concept that you're not just looking at dollars and cents when you're making your decisions. We're thinking about the economic viability of our decision. We're thinking about the social effect of our decision, and we're thinking about the environmental effect of our decision. And the biggest challenge of farming is trying to balance all 3 of those. I think what you're asking fits into the social justice part of that triple bottom line. And I think it's a goal of ours to be able to offer benefits for the people who work on our farm. It doesn't right now work for us. We just can't, keep above zero on the economic side of that equation and also offer benefits. We should be able to. We should live in a world where people can pay enough for their food that they would be able to support their farmers with a living wage and with benefits, but we're not there at this moment.
Flip side is in the last 10 years, we've tripled wages. So we put all of our increase in sales to helping everyone who works with us make more. So that's a huge win, right? 10 years ago, we were paying just room and board. And now we're starting people with, at, what is it, $11.50 an hour. So our farm is growing, and the hope is that we end up having an R&D budget that ends up being able to fund a faculty chair here at ESF. Any other questions about the model? The food? Yes? The question I heard was, how do we end up on the property we are on? A lot of young people look at farming, and that's their first question, is how did you get land? We'll answer that in a second, and Kristen writes about it beautifully in her book. I think the question for beginners, and you're not a beginner, you're a farmer, you've gone through this story on your own, which is beautiful. I think the question should be, how do I get trained to do a good job marketing so I can eventually lease land and create a business on land that I don't own because it's really expensive to buy land? So what I just said was, go out and train for 10 years before you go into debt. To answer your question, Kristen and I met. We decided that we wouldn't be allowed to build a house and create a family in Pennsylvania. I said, you up for going bold and looking for land? And she said, sure. She said, we'll hire a real estate agent. I said,
It does. He said it doesn't work that way. I have a magic circle around me.
I didn't say it like that. I totally didn't say it like that.
You're total cheeseball. You totally did. And he said, I think because I have this magic circle, it's going to take, I don't know, maybe 9 months, but we'll find the right thing.
How long did it take?
9 months.
Okay.
Exactly.
Human gestation and finding land is exactly 9 months, always.
And we did find the most amazing landowner in the whole world.
And the most amazing piece of land with class 1 soil, slightly wet. We've put in some drainage. But looking for land seems really challenging unless you're out in this part of the state, right? People that are in the Hudson Valley, there's no land left. Out here, you can keep going west and find huge, nobody really wants to farm anymore. So while there are larger companies moving in and Amish moving into land, there are tons of options for land, but not always easy to find. Yes, over there.
What was the other model that you...
Great question. What was the model? I'm moving these kidneys off of the dairy in case you guys want some dairy later. What was the model I started training with versus what we use now? How many of you are familiar with what we call a vegetable community-supported agriculture share? How many people have? Okay, so good. A lot of you have. That's basically a membership. Usually it's a box of what we tell you you're going to eat. And I started training in that in my first year working for somebody else on a for-profit farm. I had done a bunch of farming in other different places around the world before this. Was in '95. And that was a vegetable CSA. What evolved, and I visited probably 50 CSAs, and I like the concept of what is the ground producing, what are you going to eat? But a couple things are weird. First off, how many of you have eaten beets in the last week?
Oh.
Great. Me too. Not everybody wants to eat beets. And so if you give up somebody a box of something that they're not going to eat, it feels funny. And then how many of you ate exactly 5 beets in the last week? Right? So me telling you how many, so it didn't seem to make sense to give you a box. There's some beautiful parts to that, don't get me wrong, it's a great movement. But the idea that I really like is that you start setting up a more and more flexible part of your diet so people can choose what they want. And then the part that was missing was what we talked about at the very beginning. If I had to make a change today, it would be that all of you go home and go buy grass-fed, cultured, raw butter. Am I allowed to say raw?
You can't do that.
Why not? It's right here. I'll sell it to you. Okay, cool. Anyway, moving on. So that's where I went. That's where I started. And there's a cool evolution along the way. Like CSA farmers that were a little bit audacious would have a mix and match CSA. The farm I started in Pennsylvania before Kristen and I met, we did it by weight. You can take 10 pounds of anything you want. And it turns out that while greens mix might sell for $10 a pound, people also just wanted tomatoes. So they would sort of figure it out by pounds. But that wasn't right either, because a lot of people eat differently. We have retired people that don't eat more than 2 quarts of yogurt a week plus a little bit of greens. And we have strapping young farmers who eat 10 times that. We've set up a model that's basically one price, totally diversified what people take. We don't really even know what people take each week, except that at the end there's fewer carrots. Other questions? Yes?
Some anecdotal evidence, especially around that
Great.
And we belong to one, and I have to say, I actually like that we don't get to choose what we get because it pushes our boundaries a little bit
Yes.
in our diet. Us to incorporate different foods. But I wonder if you know a little bit more about that, what's happening in your region and nationally about whether that's actually coming back, so less back to farms and more of the.
In our county, the last, I think, 3 years is the first time that we've had more farmers in our county instead of fewer farmers in many, many decades. At the same time, I think we all feel a softening in the market of CSA. Everybody is talking about it in the farming community in our region. Sales are harder. People want more convenience. The delivered prepared food kits are taking a ding out of everybody's business. There are more farms, therefore we're kind of cannibalizing each other's market. So we all definitely have to stay nimble and keep looking for, where to go next and what's happening with the market. For us, that meant not only doing our local share, but also delivering to New York City. So now, instead of just having people come to our farm and pick up their food, which was very much in line with our philosophy, we also send a van every week down through Albany, delivering in the capital region, and then on to New York City. And we have another van that does a loop through the Adirondacks for people who are too far away from us to come and get their food. But that was definitely something that we had to do in order to accommodate all the other farms that had sprung up in our region, many of whom were started by people who used to work for us. So it was this beautiful thing, but also we needed to figure out how to make the pie bigger so that everybody could survive in our little tiny underpopulated corner of the Adirondack Park.
So you're successful converters.
Yes, we like to convert. I think that's our best product. Yeah.
Before I take the next question, I was just checking our timing. I think the other answer to your question, I'm just formulating this for the first time, is that there are people in this country that have, I think all of us in this room have excessive wealth when looked at globally, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to give all of you the challenge to be really brave at the end, to do something beyond what you're comfortable with, because I think we're all wealthy enough to be here. But there is also, as you've seen from the graphs, the top 0.1% has gotten excessively wealthy in the last 20 years, 200 years, whatever you want to say. And when you were talking about sort of what's happening with CSA, part of me was realizing that I've been asked to speak to venture capitalists before, and they're always looking for how to sell $1 songs to you on your iPhone so that they can make billions. They ran out of places to put their money, and they were like, what about food? And so I think one of the things we're going to see is that as large corporations and wealthy individuals are like, where else can we buy derivatives in housing, let's say, they're looking now to food. And you'll see changes where I believe it was Amazon bought Whole Foods and lowered prices. But I'm also seeing in land acquisition and in these Blue Apron style businesses that there's getting a ton of capital. And the little farms, I would call us a medium farm, are not in that. We're not a good investment. But it's been fascinating to watch that. I think that we're going to see huge shifts in factory food where people are growing lettuce in cities in hermetic environments, which I think may be the opposite of healthy lettuce. Unproven science, but my gut sense would be the biome is real. Grow your lettuce in a biome, help your biome. But when you were asking that question, my first thought was, oh, there's something bigger at play here, which is people with money are looking for how to sell a $1 investment to you, and food is one of those things. So I would say that corporate ag, while great that they're going into farming, great to see that investment, puts us all at some risks, and I think it'll be interesting to see the next 20 years. I think we'll see lots of fast changes where robots are making prepared meals, for instance. And I think that will have an impact on those of us that are trying to figure out how to convince you to buy a less than beautiful potato and peel it and cook it.
And I'm going to add a slight counterpoint to that, which
Ready.
is, that 1% is also interested in philanthropy. And there have been some huge benefits to progressive agriculture through foundations and grants and other philanthropic efforts. Mark and I started a nonprofit 5 years ago now that we no longer control, but that is out in the world doing good stuff called the Essex Farm Institute. And they're working toward using philanthropic money to train farmers in sustainable methods and to draw the connection between agriculture and climate change, and to be able to spread the word about agricultural methods that can help mitigate climate change and sequester carbon in the soil.
Sequestering carbon makes me, like farming and food makes me really happy. And then when I hear sequester, I'm like, yeah, can we talk? Like that's sort of the key word to get me to like jump on the table and dance fire.
That might be a new concept to some people, though.
Yeah, and you guys didn't clap and applaud and do the little dance, like da, 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 which means we're going to go into that in a second or maybe in a little bit. Does anyone want to go into sequestering carbon? Raise your hand if you're like, I'll take a little bit of that now in a non-glazed over way. Can I do this part, or is this you?
No, you go, babe. You go. Get
All
to
right.
the meat pictures here. There we go.
I have to keep it really simple because I don't understand what I'm talking about. That's the first thing you need to know. And very few of us do, and it's where big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to help us understand what is actually happening in carbon sequestration. How many people have an accurate carbon footprint for the last week? How many people know what a carbon footprint it might be? It's sort of how much net carbon we're releasing to the air. The coolest thing about farming is that when you grow any plant, oats, beans especially for some reasons that some of you know, parsnips, potatoes, these little creatures, if you can call a plant a creature, breathe in carbon and, quote, sequester it. Everybody follow that? So basically the life of a plant is to capture the CO2 in the air, call it energy, because that's what got you up this morning. Your breakfast was entirely sequestered carbon, sequestered by plants, sometimes transmogrified by animals. That became your breakfast, right? The energy of us came from carbon sequestration. Glazed or okay still?
Yeah.
You're good in the back. I like it.
Yep.
Thumbs up. Okay, so that's basically the big arrow going down is grow more plants. The competition should be who can capture the most sunlight with plants to sequester the most carbon. The exciting part to me, we can talk about legumes later if you're really excited about how nitrogen fits into that, but we're not going to do that yet. Nitrogen is the protein that your muscles that took the energy from the air grew with. Forget it. Not going to talk about it. The most exciting thing in agriculture is that when you sequester net carbon, you increase your soil organic matter. Let's say it again. When you sequester net carbon, it means you didn't harvest the potato but let it rot there, or you didn't harvest the sorghum Sudan grass and incorporated it into your soil. Net sequestration makes your soil organic matter increase, which means that more carbon came out of the air than you released. I want to walk forward into you to tell you this, but they told me I have this like invisible line where I go, yeah, like I can't go further. It's okay. I'll take a step back. They were very firm. They had a little collar here. Better. That got me. Kristen, do this with me. When you have higher soil organic matter, what are the benefits across the board? One.
Your farm is more productive because the soil can hold more water. The soil can grow more plants. The biodiversity of the soil becomes more complex. You're basically doing well by the climate, and you're doing well by your farm, and you're also doing good in the world, right? So if you sequester more carbon, your soil and your farm becomes more productive and hopefully more profitable. At the same time, you're taking carbon from where we don't want it, which is up in the air, and putting it down in the soil where it's not going to do anybody any harm. How's that?
That was good. It wasn't what I was looking for. We're going to give her partial credit. This is it, right? So the first thing Kristen said much more eloquently than I'm about to say is yield. I see it. Once you've been shocked, you can see a lot of things that other people can't. Your yield goes up. So think big ag. If they think that their yield can go up, they're going to, this is great, yield. Did something funny happen? Okay, so your yield goes up. Your water holding that Kristen mentioned, you have a better sponge, so you need less H2O. And your water that filters through your soil that goes out into the lake is cleaner, and you have less erosion, so you keep the soil there. This is like this, we're talking the sponge of carbon, which is like what the back of your chair might have been made of. This is huge. This is huge. And then this is the exciting part to me, is that the taste and the nutritional density sounds a little too funky, but nutritional density, your quality also goes up. This is mind-blowing, right? If you actually solve climate change by pumping carbon We don't even know what carbon is. It's the energy that's letting you laugh, because this is hilarious, right? We went from kidneys to something over here that's like out. Here's the line. It's win, win, win. Why don't we do this? Because it's not a cash crop to build the soil yet. We can't sell improved soil organic matter when we sell a potato unless we talk about it. And it begins with education. And as Paul mentioned in the beginning, we have to communicate to each other, excuse me, as farmers and consumers, that increased carbon in the soil mitigates climate change, helps us with our water flow, increases our yield, increases our quality, reduces our need for tillage because the soil is more mellow, actually reduces weeds in the soil as well. A more fertile soil favors the crops we eat. This is revolutionary, and that's why some people are leaving. It's too much to hear the revolution. I'm scared because I learned something and now I have to put it into action. Are we good?
We're good.
Any other questions about carbon sequestration? I start foaming. I love ESF. ESF is like on it.
So much right
you have
now.
the best questions. Do we plant a tree or do we plant a potato? A potato is an annual that generally is known for destroying the soil. A tree is generally a plant that we acknowledge as improves the soil with mycorrhizal connections and does all this amazing stuff for the biome. Our ability to eat trees is very low. So that was good. If I can get Kristen to laugh once, dude, game over. Our ability to eat potatoes is high, so this is where it comes into the equation. Can I give him the equation that makes me so excited?
I have a picture of legumes up there for you, just so you know, too.
Of what?
Legumes.
No, we're not doing legumes today.
Really?
They're not ready for it.
All right, that's next lecture.
That's like advanced 101. You have asked a brilliant question, and I think the answer is not so brilliant. But we're here for ourselves. If we weren't, we'd all do these great mass suicides. It would be great. We'd be all done, and then everything else, the trees would grow, the potatoes wouldn't, we'd be fine. But we like to eat potatoes. So really the question for agriculture and for all of us in our habitat is what needs are really needs? What do we need? And we need trees. Trees can be fuel. They can be made into electricity through wood gasification, etc. So I think we do have to have trees as part of the new agriculture. I do not want all of you to leave here thinking that agriculture is the food. It is the table. It is the lighting eventually. It is all of the energy we need should be harvested by plants and converted. And that also solves some of the climate change problems. So I would answer both. And the second, yeah, take it. And until those of us that do annual cropping and produce meat, until we integrate more perennial systems into our agricultural matrix, and hopefully that's the next level of diversity at Essex Farm. We've actually offered a firewood share before, and it was challenging for us to do because we were so busy milking cows. But that is the future, is to start integrating more complicated systems than we're already using that involve fuels, fibers, as well as food, right? And this is where ESF can be at the vanguard to say, wait a second, if you're growing delicious microgreens, the odds that this is going to be your carbon sequestration, this is water in a bag with a little vitamins. Going back to my butter, this is fat in a jar with a little salt. Like this will give you energy through the day. This is like the nuance making you a little bit better. But it is the table upon which it sits that is really like the building material that gives us shelter when it's 20 below. So I believe that we have to plant more trees and integrate them in our thinking as we look at the carbon that builds the soil. Yes! Okay.
Wait, you got one right here. He's been
Live
waiting.
one.
Yep.
So, how does it scale up? Like in our Western diet, we love to eat that.
Yep. Well,
And
some of that.
It takes something like 10 times to create a pound of beef than it does. If we have a market we want, they buy with it. How do we scale a 2,000-acre world?
Yeah.
We have to fund the whole thing.
Can I start and then you finish?
I want to take it bad, but I'll give it to you.
Okay. I'll pitch it back to you in just a
All
second.
right, I'm on it.
Okay. First of all, I think our job, because our share is all you can eat and free choice, one of my biggest jobs as the official farm communicator is to get our members to understand how very precious meat and animal products are. So in our weekly farm note or in conversations with members, we talk over and over and over again about the preciousness of meat, that we have this incredibly nutrient-dense, highly caloric protein that we can offer you. But please remember that it's a sentient life. It took tremendous amounts of resources to grow this for you, and eat it mindfully and treat it as the precious resource that it is.
Like we do with the kidneys, it's like, "Arr, arr, 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 arr," like that?
We also work really hard to educate our members to eat every single piece of meat that you see in this picture.
How many of them eat the kidneys?
I eat the kidneys. We eat the kidneys. Miranda loves the kidneys. So not just a pork chop, but a pork heart and a pork kidney. There's a beef tongue in this picture. There's the cheek meat, which is really delicious. Making sure that we really, really push bone broth, which isn't that hard these days because people are really into eating bone broth, but making sure that just down to the bones, we're getting everything that we can nutritionally out of the animals that we raise on our land. The second thing is I think that what you're pointing out is true, and it's also very local ecosystem dependent. So on our farm, we have a lot of acreage that is really appropriate only for grazing. It wouldn't be...
AKA rocks and clay that can't be plowed for anything else, but they would support a forest or a grazing.
So if we can, management-wise make those systems work together, then raising meat on our farm is kind of a no-brainer, that we can produce in the North Country, a full, highly caloric diet for people, in a climate where we have 100 degrees between frosts. But I take your point. 100 days, sorry. But I take your point that we need to keep getting that message out there that that meat is a really precious thing, and that we have to be really mindful of how it's raised. I think in popular science writing, we don't get the message loudly enough that raising a beef that eats only grass for its whole life is a seriously different equation from the way that most beef is raised in America, which is on grass with its mother until it's weaned, and then moving into a feedlot where it's pumped full of grain. Grain is highly expensive ecologically to grow because it requires tillage, because it requires chemicals, because it requires energy. And an animal that's harvesting most of its own feed, building the soil, not costing in terms of irrigation or fossil fuel, is a totally different animal, and side benefit, more nutritious for you than something that's grown on grain. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to work with you for the next 10 years to answer this question. We're actually just passing out of the first section, so I'm gonna have to hold back. Not like me to hold back. What I do want to say is we have had food surpluses on the planet for the last 30 to 40 years, and they don't get to people that are hungry. So this idea that farmers need to be leveraged towards what I would consider less healthy production methods to, quote, feed the world is not actually helpful. We're actually producing more grain than we need, and it sits there currently rotting like soybeans in piles because we exceeded our storage capacity, but markets were changed because of political changes in our country. So never has there been a time when you couldn't go into a famine with money and buy food, and never has there been a time where the food that we have has made it to the hungry people because of politics. So I think that doesn't change the importance of your question. There will come a time when I think our population growth will exceed land carrying capacity. Right now in this country, very few people want to work the land or use it. So at this point, I think we're really in R&D phase, to answer your question. And is it scalable? Not unless someone like you cares a whole lot, right? Unless more farmers get involved to start doing the research needed to answer the bigger questions of carbon and scale and where the sort of sweet spot is, then I think that we're basically going to find ourselves making very low quality food at a very large scale to try to feed ourselves. And I think we have to fight for some of these experiments, which I would call what we're doing, to see what works. And I think we're going to find that it's the local ecosystem that determines what production methods are going to be used there. Does that help?
Mark also has a secret plan to get our members to eat bugs.
And if we all go vegan, which I haven't been able to accomplish, it reduces our carbon footprint as a country by 2%. So we have a lot of other things. It's not likely that we're going to convince everyone to stop eating meat, and that's a pretty small percentage of our carbon footprint. And I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done to help us understand whether grass-fed, grain-fed, and no one even knows what the footprint is. What are you all doing? This goes back to my question, is we don't even have a basic understanding of land use when it comes to climate change. All right, we got to stop there. We're on to our next section.
Oh.
We're right on time.
Before we shift, I just want to highlight that in order to help facilitate questions, we are going to have a portable mic because we want to make sure that the questions are loud and clear for both this audience as well as our televised audience, our broadcast audience. And Bree will be helping move the microphone around. So if you raise your hand, we'll get the microphone to you, and we'll keep in touch with who's next in the questions. All right. So thank you all very much. And to scale, I just want to say that we've tried fewer, larger farms.
Okay, our next section is maybe, and I am very grudging to accept this. I'm going to drink a little more carrot juice. Where some of you were at the writing classes we've been in the last 2 days. The power of the word right now and probably forever is going to be more than the power of the farmer's work. And I think Kristen has done an amazing job of balancing our farm. Her marriage to me is easy, that's the effortless part. Yep. But the farming and the kids are certainly high maintenance. Anyway, with no further ado, I think it is fair to say that writing is one of the methods that we will change our perception of climate change. And those of you that have gotten a chance to read The Dirty Life should know that Kristen gets fan mail from around the world of people that stopped living in cities and went out to try something challenging in the woods somewhere, and often failed miserably and write her like, it doesn't work. That's okay. It's pretty amazing. Her next book, called Good Husbandry, is about the good husband that she must have been married to at some point. And like I said earlier, it just came out. We just went out to the publisher this week and comes out in mid-October. And if you're up for it, she paraphrased it slightly. But if you want to talk about your writing, great. She said, I don't want to talk about my writing. Don't put me on the spot.
Oh,
but
you
she's
can
going to
ask me
read.
anything.
She's going to read from her new book, the opening passages. So sit back and enjoy. This is what hopefully will be the art that changes how you think about the world.
Wow, now I have a lot to live up to. Anybody here thinking about being a writer, working on writing? Awesome. I have to say that one of the unexpected benefits of meeting a farmer and falling in love with farming is that farms provide...
Falling in love with a farmer and meeting farming.
There you go. Farms provide an endless buffet of narrative possibilities. You know, there's a narrative arc of a year, there's struggle, there's conflict, there's success, there's failure, and it's given me a huge subject that I really, really feel passionate about writing about. This book picks up more or less where The Dirty Life stops. So The Dirty Life was about founding the farm and start up in the first year of challenges on our farm. This book is about, it starts the year that little child was conceived. And the larger one, who's now 11, was 3. So that's where this introduction begins. And I think all you need to know is that Jane is our older daughter and that I was pregnant with our younger daughter, Miranda, when this begins. Okay, so here we go. This is from the prologue. Some people say farming is the most wholesome job in the universe. I say having a farm is more like having a gambling problem. The farm is a living, breathing slot machine, doling out just enough reward at exactly the right moment to keep you coming back for more. Farmers are professional hopers, wafting supplication toward ancient gods we don't believe in. We hope in order to ward off disease and accident, or for rain, but not too much, or no rain, but not for too long. If frost threatens early in the fall or late in the spring, we double down on hope, trying to generate with it the degree or two of heat that is the difference between death and another few weeks of life, between a good harvest and none at all. When we win these bets, it's magic, like making something out of nothing. When we lose, the chips that get swept off the table can be measured in both love and money. I figured this out one planting season. The fields were so dry, the wind picked up topsoil and spun it into devils that danced around us as we dug our hands beneath the surface, feeling for moisture. My husband, Mark, and I had built a new greenhouse at the end of the winter, and there were tens of thousands of plants inside it now. Winter squash, cucumbers, Brussels sprouts, and tomatoes straining against the limits of their soil blocks. It was time for transplanting, but the ground was too dry. The young roots that had developed under the ideal and artificial conditions of the greenhouse, with just enough moisture, just enough heat, would confront the real world of the field, which had dried to inhospitable dust. In those conditions, the tender roots would be sucked dry, and the young, healthy plants would wilt and die. So we had to wait for rain to come and water the soil. Transplant is a traumatic event for a plant, even in ideal circumstances. What you want is a healthy, wet plant going into a nice, wet hole. Transplanting into hot dust is vegicide. Patience, Mark said, rain will come. But it didn't. The days got longer, and the plants in the greenhouse began to look like they could use a coffee. Then, like they needed an antidepressant. We kept watering them and watching the weather report, which was full of bright, happy sun icons for as far as the eye could see. Through the end of May, we watered, watched, and hoped. On the last day of the month, I opened the greenhouse at dawn to find the plants had almost given up. Their leaves were going yellow at the edges. I pulled a tomato seedling from its flat, and its soil block was white with packed, tangled roots, too much young life straining to grow and not enough to feed it. I took the plant and went to find Mark, who was welding a broken ball hitch in the machine shop. Our 2-year-old daughter, Jane, was sitting on the floor of the shop, smudged with greasy dirt, tapping 8 penny nails into a length of scrap wood with an adult-sized hammer. Mark scooped Jane up with one hand and took the sad tomato plant in the other. "What about a wet plant in a dry hole?" I asked. "Well," he said, "sometimes a wet plant in a dry hole is the best you can do." We agreed to start transplanting them the next day. The weather report offered some hope in the form of a 20% chance of an afternoon thunderstorm. Not great odds, but we had to roll the dice. We finished transplanting in the early evening. Looking back at our work was not an uplifting experience. The plants looked like an army of little green soldiers that had dropped dead in formation. Everyone was flat on the ground, stem limp, leaves wilted. A quarter of the Brussels sprouts were actually crisp. We put Jane to bed and then went to bed ourselves. We were 4 weeks from the summer solstice, and it was still light outside. There were no clouds to be seen. If it didn't rain, all those plants and the hundreds of hours of work they represented would die, and we'd have to figure out some way to replace them in order to feed our members. I read for a while to try to forestall the worry. Mark, next to me, was making notes for the next day. He's missing the gene for anxiety. Unlike me, he does not spend energy considering the full rainbow of disaster that could take place. Nor does he stew over past decisions or regret stupid things that he once said at a party, both sports at which I'm champion. He does not miss people who are no longer in his life. He does not think much about the past at all, but he does think about the future. Hope is a future thing. Worry's a ebullient cousin. He does hope. I've never met a farmer who doesn't. I could feel the history of the day in my body. I had worn a hole in the knee of my thick canvas work pants, and the skin there was pink and abraded. My fingernails felt pried up from their beds and tender from scratching in the dry dirt, and my left arm and hip were bruised from carrying the hard, heavy flats. I turned on my side to shift the weight of the baby away from my spine and closed my eyes and watched the increasingly abstract patterns of the field replay themselves on my eyelids. And as I drifted off, my hope for the plants was curled up very small. And then, hours later, I was raised out of deep sleep by the purr of distant thunder. There was one loud clap, and Mark was awake too, and we got out of bed and ran outside together. We stood in the driveway and looked up. There was a nearly full moon in the clear sky overhead. A cool breeze was rising. We could see thick thunderheads bunching to the north and west of us, backlit by strobes of lightning. We couldn't tell which way they were moving. If the storm hit us, the plants would live. If it missed us, they would die. Odds looked somewhat worse than even. The clouds rolled and churned like breakers on a reef. Mosquitoes gathered around us, landing on our bare legs. It was past midnight, The next full workday just a few hours away, but we could no more look away from the sky than one could leave the table while the dice are still in the air. It was not possible to draw the rain to us with our thoughts, but it was impossible not to try. So we stood there in our underwear, moonlit, barefoot, mosquito-bitten, with arms intertwined, and hoped. The bright forks of lightning and banks of clouds seemed to split overhead and prepare to go around us. And then I felt one fat, cool drop land on my foot. Silence. Then another. Another. Then drops were everywhere, raising puffs of dust around us and drumming on the tin roof of the garage until water poured off of it, turning the slope of the driveway into a web of rivulets that joined at the base into a small stream. Mark and I held hands and grinned at each other and raised our faces to the rain, the movement a vestige of a dance of praise to deities we don't believe in. We stayed outside until our hair was soaked and we were cold. Not even half a mile away, just on the other side of the road, it did not rain at all that night. But on our fields, it rained 7/10 of an inch, enough to wet the soil and resuscitate the suffering plants, all except for the toasted Brussels sprouts, which were too far gone to save. That spring was our 7th. 7 is a number with mystical appeal. A prime, a good rolling craps. It's the number of years that it's supposed to take for every cell in our bodies to turn over and renew. This is not literally true, because I looked it up. But it was a good metaphor for how I felt that year. My city self, my old identity, had been sanded away by the daily work, shed cell by cell, and folded back into the soil. My new self was made of the atoms of this place, of its soil, water, sun, and dust, the way Adam came whole from the mud of his garden. The farm was my home, my office, my playground. We were so deep in it, we didn't know where we ended and where the farm began. We had not yet learned to separate our own well-being and that of our marriage from the well-being of the crops and animals. But there's no problem with that as long as things are going well, as long as you and the farm are rolling 7s. The trouble comes when the dice go cold. It's not always easy to see where you are from the ground. There could be a meadow coming or a cliff. But that year, everything was good. Thanks, everybody. So that'll be out mid-October this fall from Scribner. There's going to be an audio version. I think it's available right now on Amazon or at your local independent bookseller for pre-order. So thanks for listening to the first reading of that. I appreciate it.
All right. The writing makes me cry. Now you get to ask either of us, but maybe primarily Kristen, any questions you have about the writing itself. Again, I think that writing is one of those powerful tools that we as a species have begun to explore in the last 10,000 years. About the material she wrote about there, about writing in general, or if you insist on asking questions about legumes, we have to go there too. But this is our section on good husbandry. Questions for the author or related to writing or back to farming. Anyone have a question?
So I come from a family that's very rooted in arts and creativity. And as somebody who's on the track for environmental education, I find it difficult to write for myself and sometimes for work and whatever it may be. So I was kind of just wondering what you do personally to get into a headspace where you can kind of just let it flow.
It's a really good question, and it's one of the big challenges of my life. Because I have these two different worlds that require different mindsets and different muscles. There's the very physical world of farming, and there's that very deeply meditative place that you have to get into in order to write. Sometimes they go really well together. I think that repetitive handwork or chores, things like that, are almost like a form of meditation, which can help me move toward the place of writing, or at least moves me to a place of noticing things that I'll write about later. But truly, for me, writing requires daily discipline. It has to come first, even before some farm emergency. And so for me, usually it happens first thing in the morning. My best hours are like 4 a.m. until 7 a.m. And I find that if I get some time in during those early morning hours, I can keep momentum going. I try to have a practice of doing at least 3 pages handwritten every morning when I first wake up. That's what I do when I make my coffee. I sit down and get my pages done, and that tends to keep things flowing and keep things moving. But there was a gap of 9 years between the first book and the second book, and a lot of that gap wasn't filled by any creative work at all. It was filled by, family and the household and the farm and really having a lot of time where I lost track of what I was doing creatively. So I acknowledge that it's its own form of work and that it requires, I think, more inner discipline than farming does, because farming provides external discipline. You will do your chores because otherwise something will suffer and die. Nobody's going to suffer and die if I don't do my writing, so that has to come from in me, and I have to believe fully that it's important to put it out there in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
So I don't know if this is true, but I read it on the back of your. Did you have a formal education at Harvard?
I did.
So how has that influenced your writing in that kind of style in comparison to maybe what you were writing then and what you're writing now?
Well, it made my parents very angry that they paid for an Ivy League education for me, first of all. And then I became a farmer. I think that was not what they had in mind
Not to
for
mention
me.
that she chose me to marry.
I think, I don't know a good answer to that question. I think I got a really good undergraduate grounding in literature, and that was what I loved and was so passionate about. And I think that made me want to write. I always wanted to write. When I was a little kid, I thought I would be a writer. But I think my education opened up the world of literature to me in a wide way. If I hadn't found farming, before farming, I was writing mostly travel stuff. So I was working for travel magazines. I worked for travel guides. I did a lot of moving around the world and looking at the stuff that other people find intriguing as a tourist. And it wasn't very satisfying. It was great to be able to travel, and I miss that sometimes, but it wasn't as satisfying as the stuff that I get to write about now. It feels richer, and like there's just an endless life's worth of things to think about and write about in the world of agriculture. But yeah, Mom and Dad were probably not very pleased when I came home and said, I just met this guy and I think we're gonna get married and we're gonna have this farm together. Not happy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yay.
So you said you went into Harvard, and I was wondering if you imagined being a farmer when you went to college.
That's a great question. I did not imagine being a farmer when I went to college. I grew up really close to here. I always forget to say this. I grew up in Rome. So yeah, just a few miles away from here. So I wasn't urban born, but I had spent the 10 years of my young adulthood until my late 20s in a city. I never in that time imagined that I would become a farmer. I didn't even have houseplants, like nothing. And I wasn't particularly interested in food. But when I met Mark and put my hands in the soil for the first time, it was almost like an electricity of recognition that that was what I wanted to do, and this was something that was going to make me happy. I don't think I would have stumbled on it any other way besides actually doing it. Especially then when the idea of going into agriculture as a career was completely foreign to, anybody in my age group, that was a time when people were trying really hard to get out of agriculture. And now we have a stream of people who are working really hard to get into it and to become first-generation farmers. But back then, it wasn't something that was on people's radar. Thank you for the question.
So, looking at the time, we have 15 minutes left together in the formal part of this. I think we should all throw food at each other and have a good food fight, and then eat it off the floor, and then crawl around like we're different species of animals and fight. I think that would be like a fun last 15.
Could be.
You cool with that?
Yeah, sure, go for
Okay,
it.
great. But this is the part that I think we have a little less time than we expected, and it's going to be a little weirder than we expected anyway. But we get to speak a lot. We're honored to be sort of asked to places like SUNY ESF to sort of talk about the weird that we are and the not so weird that we are, and sort of share our story with you, and that's great. But I always feel remiss at the end of a time without turning what we're talking about into changes for all of us, including us. So what we had designed, this is me designing it, but I'll say we. It gives me a little more street cred to say Kristen was part of this. But what I'd really like is for all of us, including us, maybe especially us, to make change. We are, with our fossil fuel resources and our actual wealth and our physical wealth, the richest people ever. I will say that again. We have great people around us. We have so many of the benefits that human species have been searching for 3 million years we've been upright. And right now we're watching our terrarium get kind of moldy. We're the kind of terrarium now that if you had a pet, you would throw it out and you just throw the pet with it. You know what I'm talking about? Right, where the turtle gets a little moss and then you're just like, ugh. I'm not good at analogies, so I'm just going with it. And so what I want to do at this last 10 minutes, and Paul has a couple words at the very end of the program about the rest of the evening, is to turn away from us for a minute and turn into yourself and into your neighbor maybe. And I thought each of you would go to your closest neighbor and just spend a minute or two talking about how you want to get more connected to food as the gateway drug to change. There are other things you can talk about, but I really think that most of us, how many people are 100% satisfied with their diet and it gives them the energy they need to be exactly who they want? Game on. Right? This is what happens as we get wealthier, we get further away from the soil, wealthy in quotes, and we don't get the fresh milk from the cow we just milked. We buy it, it's been bottled and jarred, and it sat on the shelf, and it had fluorescent light on it. So what I really want to see is if you can make a choice to connect some of what we're talking about here to what you put in your body to make you you. Your body actually came from carbon sequestration via plants and animals. It's so awesome. But we're looking out at this series of problems that we're all sort of like, yeah, I'll deal with that later. I feel like that time is now, and I don't know how to change myself or you. I buy 7,000 or 8,000 gallons of diesel a year. That's not right. So if you would, and I don't know how this is going to work, and it's always awkward to do anything new for me and for you, but if you would find somebody next to you and just start up a conversation for about 2 or 3 minutes about something you think you could do in the next week, and then hold each other to it, maybe share your text number to be like, hey, I did it. Because I believe in incrementalism. I think that the beginning of treading water leads you to being able to escape the shipwreck and swim in the right direction, but you got to get stronger. And the way you get stronger is take a small personal choice and share it with somebody else. That's not the only way to make change, but I think it's one way. So if you guys are game for that, what I'd like you to do is if you're not sitting next to somebody, go move around for a minute and talk to somebody, look at them in the eye, be amazed that they're alive. That's pretty cool. Still, as a farmer, we think about this all the time. Life and death are so close with us. You're not dead yet. Nobody's dead yet in this room, I think. Double check. Okay, to do that, we're going to give you 3 minutes to come up with a small action point that during finals time, when you're stressed out and feeling impossible, do it, and then we'll come back together. So 3 minutes. Yes, great.
week?
Great, and I was going to say maybe work on cooking our own food a little bit more.
I don't want to give up olive oil though.
I don't want to give up meat. Okay, great. You're awesome. Right. So you have about 30 seconds, give or take, left.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up our exploration by another 30 seconds, and then each one of you is gonna stand up and share. No, I'm just kidding.
So it was really exciting to hear how much energy suddenly came out of you all. It's beautiful to hear, and I could tell that there was a lot to talk about. And hopefully it goes beyond this classroom. And I'll tell you, someone asked, it was last week, it was SUNY Plattsburgh professor asked, how do we get up and do what we do every day? Because our series of challenges is often, even on the farm, not even talking climate change, feels impossible. And for me, it's really a morning deep breath as I first roll out of bed. It's one deep breath. I have a little breathe in 4, hold for 7, breathe out 8. That's it. If I get one breath, I'm good. I really think for me, and it'll be different for everybody in the room, coming up with a small achievement gives us, like Kristen was talking about writing, if you do your pages first, then your writing starts to flow, and then it's on your brain for the day. So I really encourage people to take this conversation, maybe go home tonight if you haven't written in a journal for a while, start using those words we're talking about here, and putting into concrete action some of what we believe in. I think without that, we guarantee that half of the population of the planet isn't here in a couple hundred years. That, to me, is a stark truth that is being brought to us by the scientific community. It's hard to imagine that. It's hard to see the gases we're talking about in climate change. It really is somebody else's problem. I'm so excited to be in a room of people that want to take on challenges and make positive change. And the truth is, going back to some of the questions we had about scale and scaling up, we don't have the answer completely. We know if we stop burning fossil fuel, we're getting better. But which one of us stopped using fossil fuel this week? So please take this energy at the end here where all of you are really excited. We're going to send you home with all of this food. We're going to invite you, which I'm going to do right now. You are invited to come see the farm. I invite everyone I meet. Very few people who say they're going to come actually do. We're very far away from where most people live. But that's such an exciting thing for us to have energy from you and the bigger community to try to solve some of the teeny little problems we're dealing with the hope that the butter becomes the gateway drug to something really exciting. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes left. Kristen has said beautifully, this isn't a meme yet, but a couple things as we've gone about our attempt to put into words what we believe. She's come up with, I think, an incredible coda to what we're all sort of struggling with here. And if you wanted to just say it in your words or in those words, I think we were going to do a second reading, but I think because of time, we'll end with this. And then we're here afterwards, after Paul speaks. We'll be here to answer all of your questions informally. We'll be here till 9 tonight. So if you want to find us later after the panel, great. But we're here to start exploring what it takes to make change. We've offered a cornucopia. You're going to go home and get to eat our food, which we're so excited to send your way. But I think what Kristen has been able to put together with words gives us all pause for thought.
And I think this is, just picking up on what you all just talked about amongst yourselves. I really believe deeply that what I'm about to say is true, and it's this. You change the way that you eat, you will change the way that you think. You change the way that you think, you have no choice. You'll change the way that you act. If we do that enough times over and over and over again, we'll change the world. And when you feel hopeless and you want someplace to start, think about that and change the way that you eat. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And you want people to come get food?
Well, I just want to thank Kristen and Mark for being here. I appreciate you guys being willing to come and play, excuse me, from what started in a farm field conversation of, gosh, do you guys ever visit colleges? To now, several months later, actually being here. So thank you again for taking the time. And I'd like to thank Miranda and Jane, too, for being here and being both supportive of your parents and patient with all of us. So thank you. So the other thing that I want to share is that we're going to transition into the reception, and I want to encourage all of you to please stay, and we'll take a few-minute break. Everyone can go to the bathroom, grab some water, and come back. And Stackhouse Farm Catering, we're going to be going through a delicious menu of offerings. We're also going to give them a chance to talk very briefly about what they do, as well as we have some students who have a project they've been working on, and also the Onondaga County Resource Recovery Agency is here as well. So during the reception, it is an informal reception. We will have a couple of comments. You'll be able to obviously interact with Mark and Kristen. I would also like to ask you sincerely, we have food for 100. There's 85 people in the room, or maybe a few of you have drifted out. There's 85 of us. That means all of you need to invite your 15 favorite friends. So get out your phones, tell everyone to be here. The reception is farm to table from 5:30 until 7, and then tell them at 7 o'clock we're going to have a panel discussion with 4 alumni from ESF who have put their academic career here to work in building a farm-based career in new agriculture. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope all of you will stay for dinner, all of you will stay for the panel, and please invite all of your friends to join us for both. All right, so thank you all for being here. I know it's finals week. You guys have been very busy. I know there were capstones today. There was finals. There's all kinds of other stuff going on. So finally, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here. Thank you.